Imagine spending the lives of millions of people, the resources of an entire empire, and centuries of time building a wall, thousands of kilometers long, 10 meters high, wide enough for 6 soldiers to march abreast across the top. And then that wall fails to stop a single enemy. Not one. The Great Wall of China, the walls of Constantinople, Hadrian's Wall in Britain, the Gorgan Wall in Iran, the Maginot Line in France, the walls of Babylon. Official history calls them military defensive structures, protection against enemies, symbols of imperial power. But every single one of these walls was breached, bypassed, or simply ignored by the enemy. Some in the very first year after construction, some never saw a single attacker. Why were they built? The real answer has nothing to do with war. It's about something else entirely. And when you hear it, you'll start looking at the map of the world in a completely different way. Let's start with the most famous wall in the world. The Great Wall of China, 21,000 kilometers, built, according to official records, from the 7th century BC to the 17th century AD, more than 2,000 years. Official purpose: protection against nomads from the north, Huns, Mongols, Manchu. Now the facts. The Mongols conquered China in the 13th century. The wall didn't stop them. The Mongol army simply found a gate, bribed the guards, and walked in. The wall stood. China fell. The Manchu conquered China in the 17th century. The wall didn't stop them. They entered through the Shanhaiguan Gate, which was opened for them by a traitorous Chinese general. Again, the wall stood. China fell. Not a single major invasion in the history of China was stopped by the wall. Not one. Military historians know this. They explain it by saying the wall was less of a physical barrier and more of a signaling system. Smoke signals from tower to tower. Rapid transmission of information about enemy movements. Fine, accepted. But then, why make it 5 meters wide at the base? Why build interior rooms inside the towers? Why equip it with drainage systems, water channels, ventilation shafts? A signaling system doesn't need a drainage system. Let's look at the wall as an architect rather than a historian. The towers of the Great Wall are built at intervals of 150 to 500 meters. Each tower has 2 floors. The lower floor has arched passageways, storage rooms, and a ventilation system. The upper floor, battlements and observation platforms. Here's what's interesting. The arrow slits in the wall face both directions, not only north, where the enemy supposedly came from, but also south, into China itself. The official explanation: this allowed defenders to fire in case the enemy had already breached the wall. Possibly. But there's another explanation that nobody officially considers. The wall controlled movement in both directions, not only from outside to inside, but from inside to outside. This is not a defensive structure. This is a customs and border control system, a monumental apparatus for regulating the flow of people, goods, animals, and information. And when you look at the wall through this lens, many things start to fall into place. Along the wall there are not just towers. Along the wall there are cities, markets, inns, warehouses, an entire infrastructure oriented not toward war, but toward trade and movement. Let's move to Britain, 100 AD. The Roman Emperor Hadrian orders a wall built across the entire width of Britain, from the Solway Firth in the west to the River Tyne in the east, 117 kilometers, up to 6 meters high, a fort every Roman mile. Official purpose: protection of Romanized Britain from Pictish raids from the north. Here's the problem. The Picts never represented an existential threat to Roman Britain. They were scattered tribes without unified command, without siege weapons, without a fleet. They raided for cattle and slaves, not for territorial conquest. You don't build a 117-kilometer wall against that kind of threat. Against that kind of threat, you deploy mobile patrols. But the wall was built in 6 years, using 3 full Roman legions. Now let's look at what's along it. Every Roman mile, a mile castle, a small fort with gates on both sides. Every few miles, turrets, intermediate watchtowers. On both sides of the wall, roads, not paths, paved military roads. This is not a security perimeter. This is a customs border with checkpoints every 1.5 kilometers. Roman sources confirm it. Tolls were collected at the gates of Hadrian's Wall, from merchants, from travelers, from cattle drovers. The wall was the cash register of the Roman Empire at the edge of the known world. Here is a wall you have most likely never heard of. Iran, Golestan province. Along the southern shore of the Caspian Sea stretches a wall 195 kilometers long. The Gorgan Wall, built presumably in the 5th to 6th century AD by the Sasanian Empire. It is longer than Hadrian's Wall. By some estimates, more brick was required for its construction than for the entire Great Wall of China at the same length per kilometer. Most people in the West have never heard of it. Official purpose: protection against nomads from the north, from the territories of modern Central Asia. But here is what archaeologists discovered during excavations. Along the wall, at regular intervals, there are 36 forts. Inside each fort, remains of kilns were found, not for heating, for production, metallurgical furnaces, blacksmithing equipment. Why would a defensive wall need forges? And one more detail. Along the wall ran a canal, nearly the full length of the wall. The canal supplied the forts with water, but also powered water wheels, which in turn supported manufacturing. The Gorgan Wall was not simply a border. It was an industrial corridor, a linear production complex 195 kilometers long, protected on both sides, and supplied by its own water artery. Who builds a defensive wall like that? Now I want to offer you a different way of looking at all these walls, not as military structures, and not only as customs borders. Look at where they are located. The Great Wall of China runs along a geological fault line. Hadrian's Wall cuts across the peninsula precisely along the line, dividing 2 geologically different soil types. The Gorgan Wall runs along the coastline, along the boundary between 2 climatic zones. Is this a coincidence? Now add to this a fact that official science acknowledges but does not emphasize. All of these walls are oriented relative to cardinal directions with a precision that would have been unachievable without advanced surveying instruments. Hadrian's Wall deviates from the latitudinal line by less than half a degree across its entire length. Sections of the Great Wall are aligned to the magnetic meridian with an accuracy that modern researchers still cannot fully explain without satellite navigation. Who performed these measurements? With what instruments? And one final question I want to leave you with unanswered. All of the world's great walls are located at roughly the same latitudes, between 30 and 55 degrees north latitude. This is not a random band. This is the zone where the main global wind currents flow, where the most productive agricultural lands are located, where the majority of Eurasia's population is concentrated. If you wanted to control the movement of people and resources across the entire Eurasian continent, where would you build your walls? Exactly where they stand. Let's return to the beginning. The Great Wall of China stopped no conquerors. Hadrian's Wall didn't stop the Picts. The Gorgan Wall didn't stop the nomads. The walls of Babylon were taken in a single night. The Maginot Line was bypassed in 3 weeks. Official history explains this as failure, miscalculation, betrayal, the military cunning of the enemy. But what if they were never meant to stop armies? What if every great wall in history was built for the same purpose, to control, measure, regulate, and tax the movement of people and resources across a defined territory? What if walls were not a shield, but a cash register? And what if whoever built these walls in different corners of Eurasia, in different eras, on different continents, knew something in common about how the world works and how to govern it. Because the walls are too similar to one another, too precisely positioned, too well constructed to be merely a response to a local military threat. Someone knew where the real boundaries ran. Not political, not military, something else. In the next video, we will look at exactly what these walls divided, and why that division still exists today, just in a different form. Subscribe! The next video is already ready.